you're not gonna like it, so. Her mother, my daughter,
Yes.
is James Dawson person, and she visits prisons to help people in prison. There's a lady in prison, that brings women, she wants to get over. And she's kind of written, she's written some more, I think she's pretty bright. She gets out on work release in October. Headed for Longview. And I wanted to call Matt Anderson. He didn't give me much hope, but I'm saying if he's with Walstead.
Right.
Yeah, because he's part of the road, and I thought he would. But I was gonna have her write a resume, write what her case was, giving me why she's there. And she's going to write it.
Why would she?
I don't want to tell you, I'll tell you.
I thought Paula was going to come, as far as I know. No, I was kind of hoping that Paula would come. She's usually here. Or look back. Right. Yeah. And I've talked to her since she picked it up, so. She's not usually this way. Okay, so I guess we'll get started. Rise for the flags.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Paul Jensen,
Here now.
Sherry Rock,
Present.
Paula Moselle, Connie Taylor,
Present.
Julie Jones.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will begin with citizen comment for items not on the agenda. If you wish to comment about something that is on the agenda, you could have the opportunity to do that when the item comes up. So is there anyone who wants to talk about items not on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, we will go on to approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the March 15th minutes?
Yeah, I move we approve the minutes as printed.
Second.
Okay. Here she comes. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for March 15th, 2018. Is there any discussion?
I really like these minutes.
I really dislike them.
think-
I really dislike them
I think you did a
too.
great job.
I really object to.
Okay, but do we have any discussion about changes or additions or anything like that? Okay, so all in favor of approving the minutes for March 15th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Abstain? All right. So the agenda, next item is to approve the agenda. Do we have any, okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as it stands.
Do I have a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for the April 19th meeting. Is there anybody have any addition? No additions? Okay. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Negative? All right, the next item is the Planning Commission's rules and procedures with,
Move to approve. I second.
okay, June, seconded by Connie. Okay. So do we have any discussion about that, or everyone's okay? Okay, all in favor of approving the rules of procedure, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we want a roll call, sort of? No. Anyone opposed? All right, so we have here the copy for everybody to sign, which I guess we could do at the end of the meeting, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, then the next item is a workshop for Transportation Improvement Program discussion. And we have a map in our packet, so, Travis?
So I have a couple extra maps, 11 by 17, if somebody wants to see a larger copy of that.
I would.
I also have 2 posters here.
It's a little small.
One direction, another.
So I'm going to call a point of order. One, I don't think it follows our procedures that we just adopted to not have the citizens' comments come at the top of the agenda, which is the way the city council does it. We've been instructed to follow their format. So I think it's out of order to not follow that agenda.
I don't think that's a
And you have not called for public comments, and you brought this to the floor.
On the transportation thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, well, why don't we have a staff report, and then we can certainly get to public comments.
Is there a reason we're not going to follow our procedures?
I didn't see that in our procedures.
If you go to the section on workshops, the workshops is for the discussion of the planning commission. It's not for comments by the public.
I'm not really following what your problem is.
Well, we just adopted a new set of procedures.
Yeah, right.
We're not following them.
In what way?
Well, public comment comes at the beginning of the meeting. And workshops are workshops amongst the council members. It's not a dialogue session.
You are procedurally correct in that.
So if you're going to call for
So-
public comment, when are you going to call for it? I mean, the public should know when their comments are going to be appropriately made.
When, as it says on the front here, items on the agenda will be heard at the time the item is discussed.
So is that now?
Yeah, but I would,
And I think in this case, the work session is the public and the planning commission interactively having a conversation about topics, and anybody can speak at any time in the work session.
I think it's only if you're recognized by the chair, Travis.
well, you know, we will just, come up and, but it seems to me we should have a staff report first so we know what we're talking about here. Okay? So Travis, if you would.
Well, if you'd note my point of order, I mean, we're operating outside of procedure, Robert Rules of Order. We're not following our own procedures.
I disagree.
Well, if you want to cite proper procedure from someplace other than Robert Rules of Order, go right ahead.
This, Robert's Rules of Order has not come up. You said the word Robert's Rules of Orders, but I'm not sure what it has to do with this situation.
I'm assuming that work session might be the rule of Robert's Rule of Order, because you're operating what you just voted on doesn't discuss that. It simply, so you're talking section 5.
5, yeah.
I mean, we can proceed. I just am like, I think it's confusing for the public.
I think we can work through this fine. So, Travis? Yeah.
Okay, so, staff was talking to the city council about this on Monday, and staff has had some internal conversations about the need for a transportation improvement program that lays out a larger idea of what transportation needs for the community going forward are going to be. And so staff took down the transportation map that was up at Public Works, and we started just having a quick conversation. About what are the potential projects, big and small, that are currently affecting our transportation system. We based it upon projects that have been considered in the past, projects that are currently in work, and some of the long-term goals that we would need to achieve an improved circulation plan for the city. And so we came up with an initial map that was part of your packet, and it was numbered 1 through, I forget what the number was, might be 1 through 20 at the time. And in our conversations with various people around the community, some questions were raised about, okay, are these stuff we're going to have to build? Is this stuff we're funding? Is this stuff in rank order because they're numbered 1 through 20? And so we made some minor adjustments since your packet was prepared. We put all of the projects in alphabetical order because there is no prioritizing associated with it. The purpose of this exercise, or the purpose of this work session, is for you to simply take a look at some of the potential needs that were identified for staff, and for you to see if there's anything that you think also needs to go on this list for future consideration. What we will do is add anything that you identify that needs to be on this list. We added a couple from the city council meeting on Monday, and we are going to hold a open house probably in May or June, and talk to the public about potential needs and other ideas that they have. We will take the opportunity to try and do some preliminary estimates of what each project would cost, and then we will try and rank them in various different methods of whether or not it's high priority, low priority, medium priority. The question is it a safety improvement, kind of rank it on safety criteria. So we'll develop some criteria and bring it back to you later on in the summer so that you can take a look at some of those things, and if you choose to, you could make a recommendation for how to prioritize them to the city council to include on the TIP, which is the 6-year transportation improvement program. And then it would go to the council committees for review, then it would go to the city council for them to figure out, okay, how do they want to prioritize these? Do they want them all on a map and figure out how they're going to fund them, or do they just want to limit the number that is on that for consideration and funding? But part of staff's reason for doing this is for us to go out and start pursuing grant funds to get these projects done, because it has to be on an approved plan. Even if it's not in the TIP for funding, it needs to be on an approved plan for it to qualify for one of the grant programs. So at this point, we're just throwing everything on the map, and we're going to see what rises to the top and what warrants funding and what needs to be implemented. So at this point, we're not asking for anything other than, do you see things that have been missed? Where else would you like to see staff to take a look and do a quick analysis and figure out what makes sense and how would it improve our circulation system?
I have a question.
Sure.
I noticed that some of these improvements are outside the city limits. And it would appear that to do these, the city would have to provide services to these areas. Maybe yes or no, but I'd like you to address that issue. And is there a priority to get things done within the city prior to outlying areas?
Sure. That's part of the reason why we're having this conversation, because being new to the city, I'm not sure what would get most bang for the buck. I'm not sure what we can partner with the county on. I'm not sure what we can partner with the Department of Transportation on, because before we can start having those conversations, we have to figure out what we need and get in line to compete. Like for Department of Transportation funds, we'll compete against Vancouver on Richfield, Center, and Kelso, and anybody on an interstate or a state route, we're going to be competing with them for different dollars. So we have to figure out what projects we want, and then figure out how those projects score so that we can plan on pursuing those projects. Also, we don't know what the urban growth boundary is going to look like going forward, so it might be something we do in 2040, and at that point, it might be in the growth area or it might be in the city.
That was going to be my next question, so thank you.
But part of, and the next part of the conversation will be water and sewer pipes. As for example, we have a 4-inch water line that goes out Gehrig, out past the farm units that are there. Should that have been an 8-inch or a 12-inch or a 16 or an 18-inch? I don't know. But we get to replace that water line if we ever need to. So it's one of those questions of should we put in a date back then and then we didn't have to replace it? You know, unless we start having that kind of long-range discussion and decision right now. We never, you know, we might end up replacing the 4 with an 8, then the 8 with the 12, and the 12 with an 18. 4 years from now, we'll be at 18.
You know, Travis, I think you guys should verify your records. I think it's been replaced with an 8-inch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, down to Thoney's. I think that was replaced when George was still, I think about 10 years ago, that line was replaced with an 8.
I didn't know that. The map I saw said it was a 4. So, might be great if it's an 8. Hopefully 8 is good enough. So.
My comment would be, you should show Clark County connections here. You're not showing Hayes and Old Pacific Highway coming into this transportation plan, and those are like major, I mean, when the freeway shuts down, as we all know, routing through Woodland's a big deal, and it's also an evacuation route.
Yes.
Oh, your new
I do
map?
have that
Your new map?
for consideration, yes. So
Yeah.
there is a larger map for that part of consideration.
Do we have, I didn't receive a copy of that in my packet.
You did not. This is something that I took off of my wall. I wasn't sure whether this would come up. But this is just a base map. There's no layers on it.
Because Hayes Route is a fairly major route for trucking, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
especially if there's something on the freeway that comes down that way, actually down Pratt.
and Hayes, the CC Street Bridge, I think is technically the name of it, and the Clark County sent me some traffic counts that were, I believe they were 2015. They also, the Department of Transportation has more recent counts because they are doing the intersection analysis for exit 21. So I do know that there's going to be additional data about that intersection coming. I've also requested some additional information from the Clark County GIS system, and they sent me a list of kind of North County subdivisions that have occurred in the last 10 years. So with a little bit of elbow grease and some time, I will be able to figure out, okay, you know, how many of those trips might reasonably be going north and along over the over that bridge or north and through 503 through Woodland, because there is a high probability that a lot of the Clark County growth is impacting our intersections, and it's not necessarily reflected in kind of our land use or transportation plans. You know, if we need to be replacing that bridge or pursuing other exits off of the highway, we're starting to do that analysis, but I just haven't gotten there yet at this point. But it will be part of our future conversations and the open houses. Hopefully I'll get more of that done so that when it's open to the general public, we'll have more of that information for discussion.
So this map would not be in the comprehensive plan. Is that correct, the one that's here?
You know, currently, the transportation map is not in the comprehensive plan. The TIP is in the comprehensive plan, and that's kind of uncomfortable because the TIP gets modified, and it can change every year,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily update the comprehensive plan. So we're in this kind of limbo situation where the comprehensive plan only recognizes the 2015 TIP, and any changes that we've made since then are consistent with the city's TIP, but it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. But fortunately, because our TIP is kind of a quirk of it has a lot of projects and nothing gets crossed off of the TIP, it's probably pretty consistent with the one that's adopted with the comprehensive plan. But say, for example, if we were to, we're receiving grant money to do a Safe Routes to School program, so one of those will be completed, and it'll still be in the comprehensive plan, but it will no longer be on the TIP once it's completed. We also have some overlay projects that when we get to do the street overlay, it will still be in the comprehensive plan, but it will be completed, so.
Okay, so I assume maybe some audience members might want to comment at this point? If so, please come forward and identify yourself and address. Name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Steve Madsen. My personal address is 11610 Lewis River Road, area Washington 98603. I am general counsel for Aho Construction. As you may or may not be aware, Aho Construction has submitted a letter of intent to bring approximately 150 acres into the urban growth area. This is what's commonly referred to as the Donald Farm. It's just south of Wayland Road. Combined with that is likely going to be the Ferguson properties and the Sagawa properties. And while I don't have relationships with those folks, that's my understanding. And those three property owners together represent roughly 90% of a chunk of land just south of Wayland Road that lends itself very well to residential development. And to get the sticker shock right out there, I would expect that if all three of those properties were to develop within the constraints of environmental and stormwater ordinances, you're probably looking at approximately 1,000 homes. Single-family residences, mostly detached, probably some attached. Our interest in the Transportation Improvement Plan revolves essentially around the proposed new on-off ramp, what would be referred to as Exit 20. And we believe that that is a critical piece of infrastructure for the community. The port certainly has interest in accessing a southern route to bypass Exit 21, and I think that's also reflected in this plan, or in the options proposed. So I'm simply here to let you know that that's what our plans are, that's what we're requesting. The City Council on Monday night voted unanimously to move forward with the updated comprehensive plan process. So we intend to be, front and center in that process. So I'm here to answer any questions and engage in whatever discussions you all want to have regarding that project and, how it affects the other components of this process. Thank you.
What was the first family you mentioned? You have Sagawa and Ferguson?
Well, the Donald Farm
Donald.
is what's commonly referred to. It's approximately 150 acres, comprises approximately 6 parcels, I think, 6 or 7 parcels.
So this property is outside
Yes.
urban growth boundary?
Correct.
Outside, okay.
It's near Waltz Meads.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at the property just south of Wayland Road, if you go basically from I-5 to the train tracks, that's what we're proposing to be brought in.
Although that's not before you now, but it will eventually.
No, and that's why I'm suggesting this is you got a lot, we're talking about massive expansion of the city of Woodland. I mean, we're talking about creating a real city here. And there are a lot of moving parts. And I've worked, just give you some information about my personal background. From 2005 through 2011, I was the Government Affairs Director for the Building Industry Association of Clark County. So I've worked through virtually every residential development issue you could imagine through the housing collapse and post-collapse. Me and AHO fully appreciate all the components that go into an expansion of a GMA jurisdiction. I've been working in GMA jurisdictions for 14, 15 years now. And I know some of that's unfamiliar to you, and some of it's going to be unfamiliar to both Cowlitz County and the City of Woodland, because I can tell you that when Ridgefield embarked on a similar expansion back around 2007, 2008, and continuing to today, it's not been easy. It's been difficult. There have been a lot of differing interests involved. I think Ridgefield has managed it well. They have maintained the viability of the wildlife refuge. They've placed that as a centerpiece of their community, and I think we have a lot of opportunities here, not to just pack people in, but to, create new things as well. Certainly, these are going to be new ratepayers for your water and sewer systems. There will be system development charges. We haven't just got into impact fees, but those are all issues that are going to come before you, come before City Council. I just want to try to assure you that, at least from AHO's position, we come ready to build a community and all the things that entails. So.
Any other questions or comments?
I might have heard this tangentially through you, but I think I heard it through a surveyor that Cowlitz County triggered GMA.
No.
I heard that, I just think I heard that within the last 2 weeks, that our growth was that we had triggered GMA.
I heard that as well, but I heard it secondhand. So I
Yeah.
haven't been able to verify.
You haven't heard anything like that?
I have not.
Yeah, I think I heard that from a surveyor.
And I will tell you that that is not relevant to this conversation. And the reason why I say that is because in 2002, Cowlitz County passed a resolution that basically mandated any expansions into the Cowlitz County from the Woodland UGA specifically, this is specific to the Woodland UGA, would comply with, all the various aspects of the Growth Management Act, and Travis and I are sifting through that right now because, quite frankly, it's a document that hasn't been exercised very much since 2002. But there is a process in place. With Aho and the county and the city are all working through that right now, and so
You're gonna
it's
stay
a
within that
learning
matrix.
process. Yeah. The good news is you have people here, and I've worked with Travis at Clark County years ago, so we're familiar with each other. So we have a good working relationship, and Tracy, your new Public Works Director, is phenomenal. Applaud her enthusiasm and her can-do attitude. And so I think we have, and I would also, your new city attorney, Frank Randolph, is somebody I've worked with for years, and I have complete confidence in his ability to advise you on what's legal and what's not, and look forward to working with him as well.
Okay, I just need one point, and I
Absolutely.
think I know the answer.
Sure.
So, all the fees, revenue, everything from, this will be in the city of Woodland, and the
So-
city of Woodland will benefit
Well-
from construction. Who's going to put the services out to this area?
Okay, so,
Should I answer that? Maybe I should.
yeah, go ahead.
So, at this point, there are no applications pending, but that will be part of the conversation that we're going to have when we talk about expanding our urban growth area and our comprehensive plan. Because the city theoretically, under growth management, you can have county development in an urban growth area. Clark County does it all the time, but cities can also require annexation prior to extension of services. So if they need water or sewer, the city does kind of have that tool or that leverage.
That's exactly why I'm asking.
Yes, and we have volunteered annexation agreements. So it's, and the city, and the county has committed to permit the project as though it were being developed in the city. So all your building codes, all your development standards, those are going to apply to our project.
Is there an application at the county level?
No, because we can't.
Okay.
In other
So you
words,
don't
there's...
really have a binding agreement with the county, you just have a pre-app type of conversation?
It's a little more than that. Are we vested to a permit? No.
We haven't applied.
The process, and I'll explain the process to you because it was new to me when I learned it. So the process is...
Getting into project building and stuff.
No, I'm talking about expanding the comprehensive plan. So the process...
So you're talking about a comp plan and the change
Yes,
in the
a
county.
comp plan amendment.
I understand what the county process is.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's a comprehensive plan amendment.
Yeah.
And the way you have to do that, there's two ways to do it under the county's resolution. It can either be a landowner-initiated request, or it can be a city-initiated request. In this case, there are a number of landowners making the request, and those requests start at the county, and we did start at the county. We've had what they call a preliminary consultation, which essentially meets the county's requirements, and then they refer it to the city for evaluation. So now, because of the size of the project, typically, it's pretty clear that the resolution envisioned, a 5-acre parcel wanting to be brought in, not 150 acres, right? So the scope of our project, I think, is part of what's demanding this revisit. Certainly without it, we're not going anywhere. Without a comprehensive plan boundary expansion, our project's dead in the water. And because right now the property is zoned, our property particularly is unzoned, and it's Cowlitz County Comprehensive Plan designated small holdings, which is basically 5 acres, and 5-acre minimums. And the way that you prove that you can be brought into the urban growth area is that you can supply municipal services. So it's definitely a chicken and egg problem, and that includes primarily water, sewer, and transportation. So to go back to your questions about water, sewer, the roads you're talking about tonight, those are all going to be requirements of this development. And we understand that fully. So I don't know if that, I hope that answers your question.
And you do know that our comp plan we can't open it until,
February,
correct?
right.
Okay.
But there is a phenomenal amount of work to do between now and then.
Oh, I meant.
In working with the city, you know, and what we're relying on primarily is the fact that the city has embraced this project, at least through its actions on Monday night. And so we look forward to working with city staff and council and planning commission on all the different aspects. What I guess I would leave you with in terms of a pitch is that if you look at the parcels that we're talking about, these are very large parcels. In other words, it lends itself very well to a master plan development that includes parks and trails and the kinds of amenities that a 21st century community would like to have. And we fully intend to participate in that process too, with your Parks Board, you know. And so, as a scale project, I guess it's going to be eventually up to the city, do we, you know, to be or not to be in a sense. But we certainly have the capabilities, our company has the capabilities to bring that vision to fruition if the council and planning commission want to adopt it.
Your property is going to be directly affected by what's identified on this map as B. Can you make sure that you get some documents or something in writing in for us about that individual segment?
As a V. Yes, yes.
It's more of a direct.
I understand, and the way you have it written there is hopefully how it will go. But clearly, those folks have an interest, and that's going to be a technical fix. We acknowledge that readily. That there's going to be an interesting design challenge. Put it this way, none of this is easy. All of it's expensive. Who pays for it? That's to be determined. But until you create the vision, you know, that's when we throw down. And so hopefully, you know, you will embrace the general vision that it's time for Woodland to grow. And I can tell you that, I don't know if they have received your staff report from Monday night, but your staff's telling you got 23 acres of developable residential land in Woodland, in the current urban growth area. That is not going to supply your job base. That is not, I mean, you have all the industrial land you want, but you're not going to get employees that won't come to live. So this is a necessary component of that.
I don't want to be inappropriate. I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
It's a yes or no. Did you discuss with the city council price point? of
Yes.
these homes?
Yes. Our stated, and it's in our letter of intent, our stated price point, and this is a goal, not a guarantee, of course, but our goal is to meet the median household income buying ability of these homes. And by that, what we mean is we would like to target our homes at around $275,000 a unit. You know, everybody's got a different idea what's affordable and what's not.
$275,000, not, you said $275 per year. You meant, in that price point's in the, per unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said per year, so I just wanted.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant per unit. Yeah, per unit.
Okay, per
Now,
unit, okay.
that all depends on the cost of, then none of that depends on our cost of construction. We can build houses for $275,000, nice homes. Depends on what the infrastructure costs. Depends depends on what the land costs, depends on what all the other factors at play are. And all I can tell you from working in this industry for a long time, is the more certainty we can get from you, the better numbers we can give you back. If we know there's a road going in, we know what that's going to cost, we can tell you what our costs are going to be. If it's maybe this, maybe that, can't help you, because we're aiming at a moving target. So that I believe that's why this is coming to you first, because I can tell you that for our project, the primary concern is transportation. We understand we can't load 1,000 homes onto Garrig at exit 21. That's not going to happen, and we get that.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else in the audience wish to talk transportation?
Darlene Johnson, P.O. Box 1808, Woodland, Washington. Well, I'm not very well prepared because I just came to find out, what the plan was and that. The one thing that I am concerned about, and I'm always here talking about, we need jobs and we need industrial development. And if we go the route of doing all these homes before we get any really new industrial development, we're going to become a bedroom community. And that isn't something that I envision and that would be beneficial to most of the Woodland residents. So I'm interested in this exit 20. My understanding, it only goes southbound, which helps southbound, but it's going to be interesting to see how much that will divert the traffic. I know it'll divert it probably from exit 21, but I'm just interested on how it would help with the truck traffic and going that way. We were looking at connecting some, which they may do, we were looking at connecting something from Guild, an alternative from Sherman, but that still goes into all of those roundabouts, and so Jim, we'll look at it a little bit further and have more input later, but the chicken or the egg issue, I think that we need more jobs and we need more industrial area that is attractive to businesses to come here. Transportation is vital, and so if this helps with that, I would like to see that, but I'm not sure I would like to see 1,000 new homes all of a sudden landing in Woodland, because I think it makes it more of a bedroom community.
Do you see any potential projects that might not be on that map? Anything else that you think we're missing?
In what, on the, well, as I say, it's the first time I've seen it. Yeah, so.
And you'll have an opportunity next month as well.
Right,
And
and-
coming back to the planning commission and the city council, you'll get
And Jim's better at that than I am, but also not having a lot of Clark County involved. We actually live in Clark County, and when there's any issue with the road, they're coming down Bratton, they're coming down and to get north, they're going out the county roads. And so you have to have that considered. Now, we've talked to the highway department, and they're ready to set up a crossover to use the southbound lanes when the northbound lanes but they'll only do it if it's going to be closed for a week or two, I can't remember. But and there's an area right about a mile by the bridges, that they've got an area that they can cross over, because they've done that for police traffic and stuff, so they just need to make it a little bit better. But they don't want to go through that cost, and else it's going to be closed. But, a week closure in Woodland, when you can't get out, I mean, especially truck traffic, because they stopped a lot of the truck traffic making the turn coming down Bratton. In fact, we live up, is it Northwest Bratton, says it's still up? I tend to
Yes,
use
it is,
old-
Dawn.
It is,
Yeah.
it is, yeah. I tend to use the old names. But that was so packed on the last closure that you couldn't even turn up. Well, first, the center highway was packed, so you couldn't turn onto it. And people were coming down in rigs that we wouldn't, Jim Drive's truck, you wouldn't come down in those rigs and they were way over the center line because they had to be. There isn't room on those roads, so, you have to consider that. I'm not quite sure how this exit 20 would work, but we'll look at it and see. But as I say, I would like to make sure it really improves the industrial area, not just allow for 1,000 new homes. And we haven't studied it enough to know whether that would be true or not. If it doesn't, we wouldn't be for it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to address transportation issues?
Could I address the timeline? I know it's come up a lot.
Come up to the microphone.
Again, I realize there's a sticker shock aspect to this. All these projects, what we're talking about is building capacity for a new 20-year plan. So, the OFM population projections are going to dictate, depending on what range, where on the range the city council chooses to land, and assuming it revises its planning assumptions. And so we're building 20-year capacity here. So 1,000 homes aren't going to show up tomorrow. Okay. What we're trying to do is justify pumping probably $200 million worth of investment into the community over a fairly substantial period of time. And that's what this is really about. And at least from the residential side of it. And I know the port and the industrial users are fully capable of advocating for their interest in this process. That's not why I'm here. So I just wanted to let you know that you're not going to see 1,000. I mean, I'm a Woodland School Board member, in case you don't know that. I fully appreciate what the impact of 1,000 new homes are going to do with this community. And some of it's going to be good and some of it's going to be challenging. But I just want you to understand that this is a phased process over a substantial period of time.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have anything more for transportation?
I guess my curiosity is if any of this includes active transportation or public transit, or if this is just about building roads for cars and trucks.
At this point, there is one project on the current tip for traffic or for pedestrian improvement, safe routes to school project also is currently in planning. So there are a couple, but the street standards can be part of this conversation, not necessarily having to do with the tip map unless we go to, we've talked about doing a parks plan or a parks chapter for the comprehensive plan, and then we could add parks and trails and bike trails to the comprehensive plan, and they would be added to the tip once they've been identified in the trail plan. So yes, they can go on the tip, but nothing on this poster includes trails.
How about public transit?
Nothing on it is, and typically those, I guess they could be capital, like if we were to do a bus station or a bus transit center, that would be a capital investment. But right now it goes to the transit goes to the Park and Ride Center, the Visitor Center, which is on the DOT property, so technically
Yeah, it's kind of garbage.
it's not on our tip.
Yeah, and that was my question, because I think, that seems to be a part of the conversation that gets ignored around here, and I think that's to our detriment. Especially, folks that are tired of sitting on off-ramps. If we provide opportunities
Yes.
for alternatives, I think we can do it a lot cheaper than just expanding capacity.
So our Public Works Director, Tracy Coleman, has been having conversations about potentially locating a transfer or a transit node here in the county, but it has to be in Clark County for the C-Tran to be able to have a more robust presence. They can't build or make stops in Cowlitz County, is my understanding. So
Cowlitz County does have a transit agency. It's run by Longview.
yes, and I believe that's the one that stops at the visitor center.
Yeah.
But for them to have a service from Vancouver or Clark County, it would need to come up and go inside of Horseshoe Lake and have a facility inside Horseshoe Lake, because that's county.
So the current one is not, I don't believe that's Cowlitz County
I think
run
it's
transit.
It's capped, isn't it?
It's capped, so it's, I can't remember what it stands for now, but it's, I believe it's paid for with funding from a senior citizen organization of some sort. Anyway, I think there's a lot of room for improvement there, and a lot of room for conversation. I think, even if under current restrictions, maybe something like that isn't feasible. Well, under current restrictions, none of this is feasible either. So, I think making that a bigger part of the conversation is important. And also, there is right now there are a couple organizations designating United States bicycle route system route going north to south from starting in Seattle and heading to Portland is kind of the first iteration of it. And if it was good for us, I think we'd try to get on that route. I think that could bring a whole lot of money into Woodland and for very little investment on our part.
Cowlitz County does have a group that's working on a interjurisdictional trail program, and that's something the Public Works Director might be able to provide you more information on. But I know that has been being discussed, and that's part of our regional transit authority or organization that our Public Works Director works with.
Okay. I think that's a start. I guess, yeah, that's my main concerns. I also, I guess, I don't know that it's necessarily another particular project, but I think especially in our strictly residential areas of the city, I think the connectivity of the streets is kind of lacking. I don't know that that's really something. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's a perfect match for this sort of conversation and the transportation improvement plan. But I think there are a lot of advantages to having better connectivity instead of loops and cul-de-sacs and dead ends that the city pays to maintain but doesn't get a lot of utility out of it.
And actually, A on that list is a great example of that, where there were two parallel large subdivisions, but the Blacktail connection between Blacktail and Blacktail wasn't built, but the city has right of way there. So
Right.
on this list, it's one of those things where how helpful would that be to 503 if there was another way for people to get stuff?
Right, absolutely, yeah. And
Get to your friend's house
I
without
think
having to go to 503.
I think the sort of dendritic model we've got is just, it's a recipe for traffic jams and upsetting people and forcing people to spend a lot of time in their cars and not being comfortable getting out on the street and walking. But I guess, more than any one project, I guess my, especially if we're talking about expanding urban growth boundaries and building more residential areas, I guess my concern would be more about future development. I mean, if there are options for retrofitting and increasing connectivity in existing developments, I think that's fantastic, but I think, when we're starting from scratch, we have a great opportunity to do it better than we have in the past. So I don't know, again, I don't know if that's a transportation improvement plan sort of thing, or if that's just, that goes somewhere else, but.
That is part of the conversation, and
Okay.
this issue with AHO and their interest in the city is part of what's driving this. Because, for example, the V or the Highway 20 exits, or even some of these north-south bypasses that are OR, Q and J, or P and J, those are all kinds of things that are important for us to understand. Does V or does Wayland get built to rural route standards, or does it get built to industrial road standards, or does it build, do they get built to residential collector or residential minor streets? So this is part of that conversation, so that we know how to prepare and make decisions now.
Yeah, and I guess, those major roads are one thing, and that's important. I guess what I'm thinking more of is the neighborhood streets. There's a lot of hand-wringing about traffic everywhere in town here. But we kind of made our bed. We made it really difficult for people to walk anywhere, so they have to get in their cars. And I think we can do better than that. And I think we can do it for cheaper than building a bunch of big roads.
So are you proposing instead of, or what are you saying, or in addition to the required or the necessary road development, adding those things in? Are you saying
I'm just
do that
saying-
instead of?
No, I guess I'm saying, where we require roads, I guess adding some stipulations about the connectivity of those roads. Having dead ends is not, that's not beneficial to the city, because we have to maintain those roads. And we don't get any emergency access, we don't get any pedestrian access, we don't get any, public access through those roads. Whereas
Right.
if they were
I
continuous.
understand connectivity, I just wanted, it sounded like you were saying, rather than use our available resources to do road development, we were going to push that money toward other uses. So
What
I
I'm
just
saying-
needed clarification.
Yeah, when new projects go in, adding additional considerations to it.
Yes, so some of these are actually exactly for that. So A, which is the Blacktail extension, is a good example. U,
Right.
which is Woodland Creek, which is the previous subdivision name. You'll notice that it has a required step to the north. You'll notice that H seems like a logical extension of, so that we could get an additional way to get out of the Pacific Highway instead of this single access point for essentially that entire area. Geographic area comes out at an intersection that's not exactly the greatest. E is another example of that, where we need to have a cross circulation so that you can get out of the loop without having to necessarily access those 2 points.
Right.
So we're trying to create a network where there's multiple directions way to get out.
And I understand it, but those, just looking at this map, all the roads you're talking about are, major collector or minor collector at least, and that's absolutely important. I'm not disagreeing with that, but what I'm concerned about is some of the smaller roads where, if a kid wants to walk to his friend's house, he's not going to do it because he's got to walk 3/4 of a mile out of the way, even though it's, in the backyard. And I think that's a huge driver of our, a lot of the predicaments we find ourselves in.
And also, this discussion will include the transportation chapter. So if you're familiar with the chapter, you can get in there and identify if there are additional goals that are needed, like specific language that the city should be requiring pedestrian cross circulation, safe routes to school, and all of those things. Now would be a great time to add that language
into code. Because then we will have not only the map to refer to, but we will have that stronger language in the plan itself that will allow us to fall back on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Okay, do we have anything else to say about transportation? Okay. So the next workshop is on wireless communication facilities.
Come by, Steve.
So, the first section of the ordinance that is there is essentially the purpose statement for
The purpose statement for the wireless communication facilities, and this is the first opportunity for you to essentially,
Hey, Travis, I don't want to upset you too much,
Sure.
but we can't see the board. I can't see the board at all.
sorry, I will move that in a second.
Okay, all right,
So,
okay.
So what I was just going to say is, I have some pens. What I was going to do is just simply lay out a couple questions for you to help me understand what it is that you're hoping to occur and why, as a planning commission, you might think it's important to regulate the wireless communication facilities, so that should you decide to keep a purpose statement here, I will be able to fill that with information. This example that has the strikeout through it is the Clark County purpose statement for why they regulate communication facilities. It may or may not reflect why it's important for Woodland to regulate wireless communication facilities. Or if you would just want to drop a purpose statement altogether, I'll just move everything up to and skip this section whatsoever.
Did you put it there because we're required?
No, I
Okay.
just put it there because of the template I used.
Okay.
So what I did is I looked at several jurisdictions and how they regulate communication facilities. And there are some, so this one is actually out of the Clark County Code, and I simplified it and I cut probably 40% of it out because it wasn't applicable, or I didn't necessarily think it was necessary, and it was unnecessarily complex for what Woodland might be interested in. And then I also included a second item that came from our attorney, which is the state MRSC recommended ordinance, and it is extremely legal and extremely complex. If you want me to go that route, I would be more than happy
Is
to
that the
meld
one
the
with all
two
the
together.
whereases?
So,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So, I envisioned what I proposed for you with the strikeouts, and that we would kind of walk through that, and you could help me understand what was important to you to look at when these applications come in.
So do other sections in our code normally start with a purpose? I guess I...
Some do, some don't. It depends on how old they are. And there are some that have been adopted, it started to become common, a while ago, but a lot of our code is, 70s and 80s. And so at the time, it was just adopted as a big single document. And if you go back to Title I of the Woodland Municipal Code, it talks about why Woodland is adopting a code. And so you can skip it.
So I'm confused. Is the city attorney suggesting that we do an ordinance change, whereas you're suggesting we do a code change?
No, these are just, and the ordinance
It's
is,
two ways to get to the same thing, correct?
and the ordinance is really the tool
Right, okay.
for the county, or for the city council to change the code.
Okay.
It then becomes part of our code. But, so what I'm proposing is more of a comprehensive new and old. What he sent along is actually
It's more like case law.
It is very legalistic, and if you actually dive down into it, what it is specifically for, and that is for the removal and replacement or the addition to existing facilities. Because there are laws that basically say if there's an existing facility, they have rights that new facilities don't. So you can require new poles to look like fir trees or palm trees, but you can't require an old lattice tower to be taken down and replaced with a fir tree when they want to change equipment on the ground or on the pole. So what I drafted kind of skips the legalese, and it kind of tries to treat them a little more generically, on the assumption that I don't need an attorney to tell me that if they meet the codes, they will be approved. But that code certainly tells me that it will be approved if they meet the code. So we could go either route, and I'm comfortable with the little softer, easier to read version.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
Okay, I read all of it, and this first thing reads much easier to understand and reads better. But, I understand this is a code change, but I was looking at where the towers could be, and I read 1,000 feet from here and 600 feet, but it doesn't talk about how many towers there can be, and it doesn't talk about cell tower radiation danger. And I have done some independent research, and some of this radiation, especially with the topography like the bottoms of the flatland of Woodland, some of this stuff can go 45 miles. And so how do we make sure we have the right number of cell towers, but not too many cell towers, and they're located in the right place? I mean, I think that has to be part of this discussion.
Sure. And you raise a really good point, which is part of the reason why some of the ordinance are very legalistic, because the federal law, there are federal preemptions that talk about what you can review and what at a local level you cannot review. One of those things that is federally preempted is the issue of radiation levels and health. They have essentially determined what is healthful and what is not, and that is determined as part of their licensing. And so they're not relying upon each individual jurisdiction to hire a technical expert with the health and the background to do the analysis on each individual tower. Instead, the way the system is set up is essentially telecommunication companies are given a specific bandwidth, and they have to comply with certain licensing requirements, so they can't have a license for one type of facility and then put something up that doesn't comply with that and would be unhealthful or causes different kinds of problems or interferes with other carriers. Those are federal regulations. We do not regulate those things, and so...
Do we see some, in any kind of oversight capacity, it's monitored by the...
So we do have some regulatory authority, but it's mostly enclosed in our zoning authority. So in other words, we can take a look at some aspects of where they go based upon zoning, but and we can take a look at other things like aesthetics and community preferences, but we can't necessarily say there's too much of one company because they're in a certain bandwidth or in a certain neighborhood is too saturated. What is in here is some of the submittal requirements is they're required to do RF studies, and those studies would be sent out to a qualified third party that would then review it, and they take a look at a couple things for is there adequate coverage, are they looking at adding capacity versus coverage? And then they are required to figure out, okay, where are their weak spots or their spots where they don't have coverage? And they have to show that there is a coverage need in order to reach the threshold to show that there's a new tower. Our ordinance specifically says, you know, and we'll get into this as we go through, is our preference new towers first, or do we want them to look at co-location on existing towers, then we want them to look at small cell locations, and then the very last choice is new towers. So we could flip that upwards and say, yeah, you can have a new tower anywhere you want, in which case the RF study is really irrelevant because we want new towers, and so therefore they don't have to pass a bunch of hurdles of, yeah, we could go on this water tank, or we could go on this building, or there's an existing tower and we could locate on that tower. Those are co-location requirements.
Right, it just didn't seem in reading this, there was enough, if somebody wanted to put a tower on their property, you know, it talked about 660 feet or the length of the tower away from, it just didn't seem to me that adjacent parcels had that much input and control, because if you read it, it says that basically if they meet the code, they get the tower.
And that's part of what we're going to discuss today, because we're really at the first part of the conversation, based upon filling in some of the blanks that's in this ordinance, if that's the direction you want to go. We will then polish that a second time, and I will send it to contacts that I have in the communication facilities field, and they will run through it with their lawyers, and they will figure out, okay, is this allowed? Is this allowed under the federal preemptions? Is this possible? They'll take a look at setbacks, and they'll take a look at how the ordinance is structured and say, yes, we can continue to expand our coverage in woodland under this ordinance, or are there, you know, hurdles that mean you will never get any additional cell coverage or you know, fiber optic infrastructure in your city because your ordinance is not consistent with state or federal regulations. That's part of the next step that we would have.
I hope you
have a
appreciate
full
where I'm
public
coming
hearing.
from.
Yes, I know exactly where you're going. So, but that kind of half answers your question, because at this point, we really need to decide what you think is reasonable and acceptable for the community, and then we'll take that out to the community and figure out what's viable for them and figure
Okay,
out.
do you have an existing location map of where the towers are currently?
Are there any towers besides
Yeah, what is the state of
CRCs?
wireless here?
So there are two towers that I know of, and they are at the Columbia River Carbonate site, and they're both right next to each other on that property. So they are off of
Pekin.
Pekin,
Yeah.
and as far as I know, those are the only two
Well,
in
there's-
Woodland.
Inside city limits, that's
Inside
only
the
two,
city
and then
limits.
the others are up here on the hill.
Yes, there's some on the hill in Clark County, and those.
I think there's one up on the hill on Green Mountain Road.
Oh, is there?
There's another way station up there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in front of the pond. Is there a lot of interest in, do people want to put up more towers?
You know, the current trend in the industry, and I dealt with this quite a lot in the city of Beaverton, because Beaverton is having a lot of pressure, and the current trend is not towards new towers, because coverage is pretty consistent throughout a lot of the service areas.
I would think here, especially if we don't have really any
What they're
traffic issues.
What they're finding now is it's capacity issues, that intersections, like the intersection of exit 21, for example, it might be fine, you know, at 11 o'clock in the morning, but at 5 o'clock, when everybody's stuck at that intersection and they're on their phone downloading videos and articles, that the capacity at that intersection is the problem, not necessarily the coverage at that intersection. So
We could fix that with a police thing, though.
yeah. So the current trend is what they call DOS, dispersed array infrastructure, and they are looking at small cell technology where they will locate on streetlights and utility poles and buildings. And they might only have a service area of 200 feet because they don't need the massive, area like the string of pearls that connects Seattle to Portland. They are looking for how to hand off a call between the highway exit 21 and, up Lewis River Road to your house in Merriweather.
We have very spotty coverage.
Yeah. So there's several types of demand that are occurring.
Okay.
And the trend is more towards small.
Cell phone.
But
Just
if
like
you
voice stream.
wanted to go outside city limits along I-5 in Cowlitz County, did you look at the Cowlitz County ordinance on this?
I did not take a look at the Cowlitz County one because I found one that I liked and I was comfortable
Okay.
with. I can do that if you want me to.
Well, I'd like to know what we're competing with,
Okay.
because, theoretically, if you went past Connie's house, a half a mile, you could put one up under county code.
Yes.
And
And-
the ones in Clark County, and I would assume that when York's went up originally, might have been outside city limits.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a really good question because that might shape how you ultimately come down. Because if you don't want them in town, then you want to make it
Attractive
more
for it to be out of
restrictive
town.
so that they're out of town. But if you're worried about lost revenue or,
Well, and what's the revenue? What do we get off those?
$4,000 a month.
Well, no, do we get utility tax off of York's towers?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure exactly how it's done in Washington State because I hadn't been involved with wireless communications. Like in Beaverton, Beaverton's ordinance is specifically organized so that it encourages location in the right-of-way on city-owned so that city gets the revenue from the rent on those individual poles. It's also set up so that it theoretically requires a conditional use permit for each cell,
Company?
each DOS location. And they were given a choice that they could do, say, what they call a polygon, like 10 or 12 in a string down a street, or they could do an individual conditional use permit for each individual site. So if they think they're going to have nobody appeal and they're just going to breeze through and get approved, they could do 10 as a single unit. But if one of them gets appealed by a neighbor who doesn't want it, all of them are held up. And so different providers are looking at different options. The other thing to remember, and that is a lot of these towers are not necessarily like full-fledged towers are constructed by Verizon or AT&T. There is a tower company that builds a tower, and then they might sell it to or simply lease it to the providers who are going to put their facilities on that tower. So sometimes you're dealing with the company, sometimes you're dealing with a middleman, sometimes you're dealing with a property owner who's doing a tower on spec. There's all kinds of combinations for how this could occur.
So do they get a new permit when they increase the capacity or the bandwidth?
So we can go through that if you want to go through this section by section,
Oh.
but yeah. So this ordinance is specifically set up, and maybe if we want to start going through that section by section, I'll take the maps down and actually see what we're talking about.
So are we going to set the purpose thing aside for present?
Well, there's a purpose in the other one. It says, like, the city council says we should do this. That seemed like a good purpose. Reasonable and necessary to bring the city's development regulations into compliance. Sound pretty good to me. Can we just cop it?
That's entirely up to you.
It's on page 46 of 72, top of the page.
I don't see why not. It pretty much sums it up.
And you could always just leave this blank.
Or just leave it blank.
And let the council decide if they want to put policy statement.
Well, I guess from my opinion, I think some of this is good because when somebody's reviewing the code, to me, I look at code on a regular basis. I like to see that, especially in something like this, I'm already bringing up radiation things. I want to say that, this puts me at ease saying it brings the city in compliance with, upon the city by Congress pursuant to the section da-da-da-da-da. I think that's, gives me some regulatory comfort.
And that's part of the reason why I didn't just delete this. I left this section here because it actually is very logical, justifiable kind of why we want to approach this. We want it to occur in non-residential areas where possible. We want to encourage careful consideration of topography. This gets to the question of, do we have studies to explain why they're in certain locations? Topography is one of those to extend areas. So,
And I actually had that as one of my questions about topography. It's higher better.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, so that, number one there, promote maximum utilization, minimize total number of support structures. I don't know that the number is really important, right? To me, anyway. I would want to, minimize the total, impact of footprint. If making, 4 small inconspicuous installations could replace one big gross thing, I would go that route instead of minimizing the total number, right? So, minimize total impacts. I don't know how to. It's obviously not quite as easy to word as what you got there, but.
yes, and so if you look at, if we maybe move on to section D. Now, the section D is what is exempt from this. You want me to go over that real quick so you have an idea of what this doesn't apply to?
Well, I thought 15 feet was pretty tall in paragraph G.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and go through it?
Yes, and that actually I think is right out of the language from that, and so that might be preordained based upon
Okay.
the ordinance. And I think it's 20 feet, 10% or 20 feet, whichever is greater. So if you look on what was my original page 4 at the top, so my page numbers are at the top, don't mind these notes. Section D, and this is specifically for our priorities for how we would site facilities. And it goes from A to E, A being the highest priority, and that would be co-location on an existing facility in non-residential districts. So it doesn't necessarily break it down more restrictive than commercial and industrial versus residential. So it's kind of a simple breakdown. And then the second priority seems like co-location on existing facilities in residential districts.
I thought this made logical sense.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then new tower, or new attached to a structure. So typically, and later on in this ordinance, it talks about new towers have to be designed so that there are co-location stations for additional. So typically, they might have 10 foot of separation and might have 90, 80, and 70. A lot of the original towers, they would build a 90-foot station, but no 80 or 70. Now the ordinance requires them, because we don't want a lot of new towers, it requires them to go multiple stations. They don't have to build them all, but they have to be able to. That way, when the next guy comes along, we're requiring them to find a spot on an existing facility. That's kind of what priorities A and B are. We want you to find a spot in an existing facility. Now we know there's extra spots because our ordinance is requiring. This gets to your question about how do we know we would keep them? We don't. but if they are going to propose them, we want them to go where we want them to go, not where it's cheapest or easiest or least expensive for them. And that's part of our zoning power issue. And then the last priority would be, of course, new support types.
Okay, so I was looking at just the definition of support structures. Support structures do not include support towers or any building or structure used for residential purposes. I don't, maybe this is obvious, but why are we excluding residential buildings or structures from that?
Well, they're exempt earlier for ham radio operators. They're already exempt.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about any of these WCFs. Why if somebody if the tallest building around is somebody's house, or the tallest building around is an apartment building?
I think part of that has to do with exemptions, and there's, I think it's a state, or it might be part of the federal code, because you can't, technically, an antenna includes like dish TV, and if you attach a dish TV antenna to your house, it would be considered under this ordinance, because if it becomes a support structure, it therefore would have to get a wireless communication facility permit for your dish TV in the back of your house. So
We
it's
don't
kind of
want
one of those things that falls into, and
So are we saying we can't put like legitimate wireless communication facilities that's not a dish, but that's like, a public-facing facility on the top of a mixed-use building downtown that happens to have residential?
well, in that case, it would be considered a support structure.
So as defined, support structure excludes any structure used for residential purposes? And it seems easy enough to change that.
That's a
to
good
me.
question. I will figure that out and clarify that.
Okay.
Because you're right, because if it was an apartment building, they may very well want to put some antennas on the roof.
Or yeah, or even somebody's house, if they want to. I know one of the service providers in town occasionally likes to put antennas on homes or on trees on private property, in residential zone. I know a tree isn't necessarily used for residential purposes for most people, but houses are.
Well, those would be grandfathered in.
Yeah, I'm not
Those
concerned.
existing ones, but I'm not sure that it's a good idea to continue to put those types of things into residential situations.
I don't know if that's where a lot of the coverage is needed is in residential areas. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'll have to go through that mental exercise, because the question is, would that be considered a new tower or a co-location, or how would our prioritization come in? Because they may have to do a RF study that justifies that that's the best location for that. And if they can do that, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to locate.
And is that a commercial use in a residential zone?
Yeah.
Home occupation.
If it's consistent with the rest of the ordinance, yeah, then maybe there's no reason why we are exempting it from residential.
I think it'd be hard to
You're
say that
muddying the
home
waters
occupation was
unnecessarily.
happening
You've
inside the
taken
structure.
it, you've done your research to put something on that, and, you've got the RF studies, you've got all these issues. This is a tried and true ordinance taken, and you've looked at others. I just don't see where.
That is true, but there are quite a few residential units in our industrial district that are kind of existing homes, and
I think there's
the question may come up.
I think there's also potential, the whole world is moving towards, smart, connected cities. And maybe at some point in the not too distant future, it becomes cheaper to have auto utilities, read with these facilities instead of sending a meter reader out. I think, a priori saying, no, can't do it on a residence, it just seems like, I don't know, I'm not sure how that serves us.
Well, the residential uses in the commercial and light industrial zone are non-conforming uses. And so they're exempt, therefore, until they turn into a commercial use, and then they have to meet. So then you'd have to change the code in those areas and say, well, anytime you make a change to your residence in the commercial zone, you've now lost your exemption.
Yeah, that's a good point. Would it just be simpler for me to put use for single-family residential purposes? That doesn't necessarily address your concern.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess.
Where? What
I
are you
don't-
talking about?
So this is the definition of support structure.
Yeah, I read support structure, so you would add what?
That last sentence.
So last sentence about use for residential purposes. You know, I don't have a real strong feeling about it yet. I'm more curious about it, and I don't,
I'll check if
as
it's
yet,
a
understand a
legal
reason
issue.
to exclude residential
I'll check
areas.
if it's a legal issue.
Thank you.
Okay, so are you comfortable with those priorities that are kind of laid out?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then I think we can go on to section 2, which is at the top of page 5, and it's about utility pole placement or replacement of facilities on utility poles. And what this section says is that to locate on an existing structure or an existing utility pole, it would be a type 1 process, which is an administrative process administered by staff. It doesn't require public notice, and it doesn't require a public hearing. And this is where it talks about that they can add additional height under A up to 20 feet and it's only for the first replacement. In the case of the city of Beaverton, they would have a bunch of old streetlights throughout the city, and they actually have like a large number, I want to say it's like 16 different types of street poles, light poles throughout the entire city. And they would like to standardize those, and they're hoping to lure some small cell providers who are interested in taking out the old pole, putting in the new pole, and then all the equipment would be in the base of the pole, and then the pole would have a standardized light, and then their antenna sticks out the top of it. So would it help if I have some pictures of the kind of facilities. I'm sorry, I forgot to show this before, but you want to take a look at some pictures.
So the parking lot light pole that you have in your business parking lot, you can turn it into a cell tower. Doesn't have to be publicly owned.
Yes. So these are the more traditional kinds of cell towers that you're used to looking at. So this is an example of arrow doesn't show. So the one on the left is kind of your more typical cell tower. Each one of those little white panels is actually considered an individual antenna, and each one of those can carry a given number of signals on each antenna. The middle one is also considered antennas under our definition because those are just a different type of antenna. And then the one on the right, that's kind of one of those no co-locate poles that probably was old enough and snuck in before the one on the left that was required. And originally, it required at least kind of 4 feet of separation between the panels. But technology is going so quickly, you can see that this one on the left, between the top and the middle, that they've actually started to add panels or antenna between the individual arrays at the different levels. So that's how quickly technology is changing the existing towers around the place. So these are a couple types of the DOS, dispersed array systems, that are going on. So the one on the left is a utility pole where they essentially just have all the equipment up on this pole that sticks out above the utility. And this one's kind of odd because typically utilities require separation between equipment. And so you can't normally just, put phone and telephone cables, within a couple feet of power lines. And so I included that picture because it just is an example of what it can look like as a small array if your ordinance isn't prepared that requires them to either put it on the ground or encase it within the pole. That's what you could get. Now, the one on the right is another example. It's a little more of an urban example where all of that same material, so these are actual, the one on the right, those white panels are actually the equivalent of the big ones that are up on the top of the cell tower. And the equipment is a little less obtrusive, but that's, just a different example of different technology from either different companies or different times. This, you've probably seen these around all over the place. This is the stuff that Cal was talking about where this could be a residential apartment building and they have co-located antennas on the top. You can't see the equipment, but all you can see is the panel. This is essentially the two types of towers that are out there. The one on the left is what they call a lattice tower, and the one on the right is a monopole or a monopine. And it's just examples of the two prevalent structures.
So the one on the right, you could not have extra stations on it for,
I don't know, the picture's not that good, but it's entirely possible. The ordinance that you have before you requires that they provide the
Yeah.
additional stations. It may be that there are bolt holes there
oh, okay.
for them to put it on there, and you just can't see it in this picture. So these are camouflage, so two examples of pine trees and then a flagpole. Oddly enough, the short one in the middle looks sticks out just as much as the one out in the middle of the forested area.
Yeah, but I've seen these personally in cities, and they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, they.
If you're just driving by, you get a good look at them.
But I mean, they're not unpleasant because somebody's made an effort to camouflage that.
So here's two other great examples of water towers. And you can tell which one's camouflaged and which one's not. I think that the water tower on the right is camouflaged as a cell tower. I think that's what's going on there.
So is another one not really a water tower?
No, it is not a
They just
cell tower.
It just wanted you to think it was a water tower. That's hilarious.
And then I thought I included that one because it's great because it shows how they can get really creative. And you can see how the equipment base around the bottom looks really attractive. So that's most of them. Well, those are the pictures I had. So if we go back to the code, that's fine. I have some other photos, but I didn't want them, sorry. The reason why I mentioned that is because the small cell towers, the original ones that started to go up that you saw that had a lot of messy equipment and cords on the top of the poles, those were very early technology, and ordinances like ours had not caught up to the technology. And so this ordinance includes some language, and specifically like C, which is the placement in the public right-of-way or auxiliary support equipment shall be mounted on the pole or placed underground. The city of Beaverton requires everything to be underground. But with new technology, the equipment's getting so small, what the providers are arguing in that is to require an underground vault requires us to pull up sidewalk, and if you do a location, and if there's a water line or a sewer line or a gas line, you have to relocate that, which makes it cost prohibitive. Whereas now that equipment is small enough that you can get a 24-inch base. So you have a 24-inch base with, the wrought iron and the teardrops and the kind of lamp post that you can get now and
enclose that equipment within the base is advancing to the point where it's small enough that undergrounding is almost out of favor. So that's why my note is down there below, that my recommendation is that we require that in the base of the pole. That will encourage new providers to remove our old poles and replace them with something new. And ultimately, the Public Works Director who issues the right-of-way permit will get to choose what kind of pole. And, Atlantic and Pacific in the DOT right-of-way will be one style versus downtown will want a different style, and maybe out in Merriweather or at 503 have a third style, but the city would get to decide that versus the cheapest one that they can buy that needs the.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I liked your comment here, but I wanted the city or somebody to have control over the aesthetics of the pole itself, so.
Like someone other than the Public Works Director?
No, I mean, but I just didn't want somebody to come in and,
Well, and that's the key. So say, for example, Misty Lane, which is a private road, they would get to decide what it would look like if it was on Misty Lane. Whereas the city, we need to have the conversation about what we want citywide, what we want our development standards to allow for streetlights. And we should simply adopt that as part of our development standards, which is a policy decision by you and the council that Tracy gets to implement. So Tracy doesn't get to decide case by case. It's laid out for her.
Yeah, because Tracy could leave, and then we wouldn't have somebody we could trust with this.
And theoretically, it should be a consensus decision by the council as to what they want out there. Also, and it's laid out in our standards.
So, you're talking about putting equipment inside the pole. That's not you're not talking about the actual transmitter itself, you're just talking about transformers and things?
Yes, so the only thing that technically needs to be out are the antennas themselves. But all of those cords, you can put those with silver bands to hold those to the side of the utility pole. Or they could run down the inside of the pole and you would never see them. So those are design decisions that we can control as part of our zoning code. And they're probably more expensive than the zip ties that go on the outside, so.
So replacements in public right-of-ways are subject to review and approval. So private property is not subject to review.
That is correct. So like on Misty Lane, they might have to get a type 1 permit, but.
It could be ugly.
The Public Works Director doesn't decide what it looks like. If the homeowners wants, an old creosote pole with stuff stapled to the side of it, that's entirely up to them.
Does that seem like a good idea to everybody else?
It's private.
It's private property. Yeah.
Well, everything's private property except for what's owned by the government.
No,
And
we're
we
talking about the
regulate
public right-of-way, though.
but we regulate what sort of outdoor lights they can put in their parking lot, and what size their stripes can be in their parking lot, and how big their windows are, and what color their roof is, and yet we're going to let them
Yeah, we'll
continue
talk
to
about-
maintain an ugly pole when they replace it. Why wouldn't we want to upgrade
Okay,
it?
our zoning code is about the health and well-being of the public. I don't think the health and well-being of the public is impacted by somebody putting an ugly pole on their private road.
yeah, but development code, that really.
Well, then why do we have any development code?
Right.
Well,
It's a good question.
You're right about those design standards for the commercial districts.
Yeah,
But we don't necessarily do that on the residential, so we don't require a certain amount of design standards.
but we require streetlights.
Yes.
And we require that they be dedicated, and the Public Works Director does get a say in what they look like. Because they're going to be in the public right-of-way. And I'm like, I just don't understand, we're only talking about replacements, we're talking about old equipment being able to be left out there instead of improved to be visually more appealing. And I I'd do away with all code tell. I believe that people should get to do what they want, but that's not what the city believes.
I love that you brought that up, because I do have a note that talks about we do not own all the poles in the city. So if it was, say, Cowlitz UD or Clark BD, they could replace, or they could place these facilities on their existing structures, or replace structures, replace poles, and we wouldn't necessarily have control. If we are interested in better looking replacements, this is an opportunity, because new development like small cells gives us the opportunity to, like you mentioned, you lose your non-conforming rights when you add or change.
So so the PUD owns poles, right? But I assume they've got an easement from somebody, whether it's the city. And it's not free, they don't have like carte blanche, do they?
I'm making an assumption. Also.
Usually the PUD has a right-of-way that was granted by the city or the developer, and they're blanket or they're specific, but they own the poles and they own the equipment.
Right, but it doesn't give them leave to do whatever. they
Have you
want.
seen those guys out there with Magnum Power not doing whatever they felt like doing?
And another great
It's just
thing.
because it's gone, yeah, right.
No. I mean, they get to do whatever they want.
They have poles at the interchanges, and they could theoretically replace light poles at, say, exit 21 and add a cell to it. And we might not necessarily have that connection to require them to replace something we wanted to replace. I'm a little less worried about Department of Transportation than I am about the private utility worker.
So if it was a new pole, we'd get a say? This is only on a replacement
If
pole.
it was a new tower, this section is specifically about utility
Poles.
poles
Mhm.
that are removed and replaced. And they would be administrative review, so it might never come to you, you might never know until the pole is replaced with an LED light and a cell on it.
The LED lights are great. You guys walked under one of those? They have like 6 shadows for one light. It's weird.
I liked your order of preference for new support structures. I thought that made sense.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know why you called out lease areas, or if that's just a thing left over from Clark County. I don't know what difference that makes.
Where do you see that? Oh, section 4.
Yeah, it talks about they won't be legal lots of record, which they're not legal lots of record. I mean,
Yeah, like Columbia River Carbonates, for example, I think that's a lease area, that's not an individual lot. And if you're creating lots, you have to go through a subdivision
yeah,
ordinance.
that's in the short
Yeah.
subdivision, or the ordinance, yeah, the subdivision ordinance.
And this might be relevant to the conversation we're gonna have later about how far the setbacks have to be. Because setbacks don't apply to lease lines, but they do apply to property line. So it may become relevant on an individual site where there's a lease but not a property line. So if you have no changes or suggestions for that, I guess we can move on to E, for development standards. So co-location. And this section is important because it gets to the issue that Connie brought up, and that is they need to demonstrate that they've made an effort to find a co-location site. They can't just claim they didn't, they have to actually do an RF study and convince another technical professional that this is the best option and there is nothing else that was higher on our priority list or had a locational zone that was more advantageous.
I didn't see any disturbing language in here. In fact, I understood why you added the Cowles County 911 and the Clark Regional, because you don't want interference with those things, but,
I mean, if we have reason to, I don't know, if we have reason to disagree with their qualified RF specialist, what's our recourse?
Get a second opinion.
I doubt that A2 is legal. I don't think you can regulate what a private owner leases.
Are you talking for two?
Yep.
Section 2, okay.
Support that.
I don't think you can regulate that type of requirement.
Yes, so that actually can do, because what was happening is initially the towers came in and they would have only one station for antennas. And then the code started requiring that it
Be
had
shared.
multiple stations. And so when AT&T came in, they would say, we agree to lease this, but under no circumstances will you allow Verizon to lease the station next to us. At which point, no matter how much Verizon was willing to pay, they were contractually obligated to not allow Verizon on that tower. And so that's how they were getting around this co-location. And then the argument would be, well, the RF study says it can go on that tower, but because the owner of the tower, not the owner of the property, has a contract that only goes with one service provider and not the other. So they would do these spite agreements that says, yes, I'll give you an extra $100 a month if you don't let anybody else on your tower. So this kind of came out of that. Every time, it's moves and counter moves with regulations, right? As soon as you think you solve the single tower provider problem, they come up with something.
But we have a wireless tower in our church steeple, and we decide as the owner of the steeple whether or not we add another. So you're talking about if it's a leased tower, I can understand, but if it's private property tower, I don't think you can require the owner to share that. Because we get to vote every time we add someone to it. Anyway, I'm just saying, I think it's a legal issue that I'm not sure you can require that.
So I will also have Frank review that and see whether that's legal.
Yeah.
Because I will get a legal opinion on that. I think I might have missed it once before. I do want to draw your attention to E on page 7, which is about FAA. FAA has documents that automatically determine whether or not a light is required, and whether that light is red or white, whether it is blinking or not blinking. Those are all determined by an FAA document. And so, in case this comes up, there are very specific standards that the FAA applies. We can't arbitrarily require non-blinking because the blinking drives neighbors crazy. See farther and it upsets people more. So, if the FAA requires a light, they determine what kind of light it is and how fast it blinks.
it's a hazard, it's a safety issue.
Can we, just for the sake of argument, can we say if it requires a light, they can't put it there at all?
You can because you can if there's a safety-related issue, but sometimes it's not necessarily a safety-related concern for the FAA. The FAA has standards that if it's above a certain height, it can be triggered, so it might be required, but it's not necessarily tied to safety. So like for example, the oak tree in the approach to the oak tree sign and the approach path of the airport. I would assume that if there were FAA regulations that would have prevented that, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. So I don't know whether it would prevent something like that from happening. I'm assuming the FAA has the authority to deny.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like, find out what the FAA regulation is and say, if the FAA would say this tower needs a big red light on it that's gonna keep the neighbors awake,
We're not going to put
then
the
we're not
tower
gonna put
there.
the tower there.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
so-
is specifically what E says. That's why I wanted to point that out, because FAA could arbitrarily make decisions for us that this tower can't work.
They've also, I mean, they've got, FAA must have their own standards, right? So it's not necessarily arbitrary.
Yes, so we'll let the federal agencies duke it out as to which one has called. But I think that that's already covered, and I'm pretty sure that this is standard language. I dealt with this in the city of Juneau because there was an island out in the inlet where they put up a tower, and it was a blinking light, and it drove everybody in the entire inlet crazy. But because it was on the approach path to the Juneau airport, there's nothing you can do about it because the FAA required that it blinks.
Right, so we can't, I guess what I'm saying is, if we can't keep the FAA from requiring a blinking light, can we keep that facility from being built at all? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, which is not, like, this is saying something different. He's saying something different. He is saying, like, right, FAA has requirements, we don't have any say about those. If a tower triggers it, it's gotta have the light, right? What I'm saying is, if a tower triggers a light, and we really don't want lights, we won't build any towers that trigger a light.
I'm not sure we would get into that situation because we do have height standards in here which are 120, 150 depending on what zones we're in. Typically, a FAA won't require a light unless I think it's 200 feet is where the FAA lighting requirements are. So theoretically, under no circumstances would our towers be tall enough to trigger a light because we would already have pulled them down before the FAA did. Now, the exception might be if there was a tower next to the oak tree sign, it might be 90 feet and require a light because of where it is. That's where I'm not sure we could deny them.
You wouldn't get it past that. It's in the flight. I already did the calculations. You wouldn't get a 90-foot tower there anymore. So,
But I will ask that question of Frank.
I don't know that it's really, if you're asking him anyway, that's fine. Don't go backwards.
So F gets into the specific design standards that you think are warranted for the community. Specifically, height is usually the big one. So the two options would be non-residential districts and residential districts.
How tall is the light pole? 40 feet?
They might be 30 to 40 feet.
So 100 feet's pretty tall.
Pretty tall. I don't even think, I would bet you that the ones out on Beacon aren't.
100 feet.
We're in a relatively flat area, and so I don't think we need that much height to get a good service area here.
What is, number 2 there, 80% of the final proposed tower is screened.
Oh, so if it's in a tree stand, and let's say that there's a hillside with 100-foot trees on it, so the effective height of those trees are 150 feet tall. If you were to put a camouflaged monopole at the base of that hill, if it was 180 feet it might look like it's just one of those trees on the hill.
Okay, so. Okay, so we're basically saying you can go 20% higher than anything that blocks it.
Yes, because the antennas can't necessarily get through the tree tops. But if it was camouflaged effectively, you might not notice that there's an extra only 30 feet sticking out the top.
So when you go back to option 1 and option 2, I like option 1 better. In red on page 34 or 8, which
I did too.
I mean, because I think in a residential zone, I mean, what's the setbacks? I mean, some of our setbacks are 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. So I prefer the 50-foot setback.
Would that potentially pose any issues?
You could eliminate B and that never goes. We're talking 1A and 1E. Does it make sense to have both? I think you're absolutely right. B is totally redundant.
I don't see a 1B,
But there's A and then there's
2A.
So we're talking about either option 1 or option 2. You
Oh.
said you liked option
No, sorry.
1.
I like option 1.
Yeah.
Oh, so you want to eliminate option 2?
I didn't like setbacks will be the same as the underlying zoning district, because in a residential zone, that would be 5 feet on the sideline.
Yeah, but all new support towers in residential areas shall maintain a setback equal to or greater than the tower height.
What's the setback in a commercial zone? I think we have 0 lot lines in commercial zones.
So
So it'd be boom on the line. And industrial's kind of the same thing. I can't remember, it's bigger on the front yard, but side yard setbacks are 10 feet. And I would guess that Bleak's towers are 200 feet from the road.
You think they're that far?
They're quite a distance back there. You know, you're out in the field, it looks smaller, but
So in the I-1 district, front yard is 25 feet, side yard is 10 feet, unless you have a taller building, then it gets bigger. Rear yard is 10 feet, unless you're against the residence. Heavy industrial. 30 feet front yard, side yard setback 10. Unless you're on a corner or adjacent to a residential district. So they're in the neighborhood of 5 to 30, depending on where you are, and how big the building is.
Yeah, option 1 seems fine.
Okay. I think most of us like option 1.
So you want me to strike 2, the tower heights and the 80%?
Like what?
No, we're on
Oh, we're
option
looking
1
at
and
two
option 2.
We're talking about
Okay.
the red part, option 2.
Oh, sorry, we moved on to the next section, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we like option 1.
Like option 1, okay, yeah.
Oh, man. So we got that cleared up.
So in that case, what is, the next section down below is identified as C, would become B.
Okay, yeah, that's what the question mark's for, it's just redoing the letters, yeah.
Re-letter those. Sorry, I'm answering your question.
Why not?
address anything on page 9?
Sorry?
Page 9, do we need to address anything on page 9?
No, go to the landscaping screen.
We looked at it.
I mean, what if, okay, just so like that, your picture of the cactus antenna, as humorous as it was, you know, and this is, maybe this is just ridiculous, but like, I could conceive of somebody making one of these that people actually do want to look at. Maybe not a cactus, because that was kind of goofy, but, you know, maybe they make it into some nice sculpture. And we want to be able to see it. Maybe it was, you know, like the roundabout art out here or something. Like maybe that was also hit an antenna in there. And if we require it to be so we can't see it, maybe that's.
So if you look at the
Is there any-
last sentence
there's a
in
waiver.
C, and before it gets to 1 and 2, it talks about the responsible official may waive all
Okay.
portions subject to.
All right. Reading comprehension fail. I apologize.
No. It's, after you read this, it gets confusing.
Is everybody good with 9, page 9?
Yep. Okay. Page 10. Did I miss, what is CUP?
Conditional use permit.
Okay, so these are the type of, okay, reviews.
Yes. And if you take a look at page 16, there, we talked about how to format, and there's really 2 ways to do this. This is an individual zone,
Yeah.
and what you want to do will defend that versus it's easier to just say, okay, it's the administrative process in these zones. So that's the exact same information that's displayed in a quarter of the space.
Just save the city ink and
Yeah,
paper.
I'm okay with the shorter one.
Save the data farms and electrons.
The only thing that I would have to say about the new attached wireless communication facilities on existing support structures is where they're non-conforming uses. So, I mean, if there's some pre-existing non-conforming use tower in a residential zone, you know, that's a type 2, so that's Development Commission review. You have no legislative review.
Yes, so say for example, there's an existing tower that has empty co-location spaces on it.
Yeah.
That's where this would qualify. So they're not taking off one panel, an old gray panel, putting on a new gray panel. That would be the first column. This column is where they're adding that second level of array. And that's specifically why I left this one in the code, is there is some vacillation between me approving versus additional notice to the neighbors that warrants going out there for additional discussion. So the way this is set up is where I think it requires a little extra attention is in the downtown central business district, medium density residential, the neighborhood commercial, and any of the low densities. Whatever you're doing, it pretty much triggers a conditional use permit, which means it should require a hearing. And then down in the floodway and the unzoned areas, those are really redundant because I don't think the floodway would allow you to build the structures it requires to put in a cell tower. But I figured I'd better throw them in there because inevitably somebody's going to have to do it. And I also don't think there is any unzoned land within the city, so I don't know why
There isn't.
our zoning map has a designation for unzoned property. So, yeah, this is just. And then new support towers automatically, I think, warrant a conditional use permit.
that 12 and 13 were kind of boilerplate for issues.
I'm sorry.
Are you talking about pages 12 and 13?
Yeah, 12 and 13, you know, the site plan has all the north arrow. I just thought that was pretty
Yes. These are
standard.
specific submittal stuff.
Right.
And where they kind of deviate, I was tempted to just take this out and say you would have to comply with the site plan standards for the site plan. But I debated doing that, and I may go that direction. But in this case, the site plan might have to show some RF-related information. And that
I
kind
don't
of
mind
stuff.
this here because I think this is an important enough issue that I want to make sure people have their i's dotted and t's crossed. I mean, I understand the other, but I'm not,
And this might be, if there's anything, you'll very rarely hear me say this, if there's one thing that we might want to do that's redundant in our code is the wireless section, because inevitably, the applicants who are going to read this are big business people who do this for a profession. The average mom and pop is never going to read this section. And so, the clearer and stricter I can be with the big businesses that want to figure out ways to loophole our system.
and that's why I like the specificity and the detail of this one. But
So I was kind of like the neighborhood meeting, it seemed kind of funky to me. I mean, like, what's the neighborhood?
And Clark County has very specific neighborhood organizations set
Yeah,
up.
we don't.
I am hoping that in the future, it becomes perfectly clear that we've organized neighborhoods in sub-area plans and everybody wants to establish their own character based upon where they live.
It's ambitious.
So at this point.
I
that
just am not
neighborhood is-
sure what it means.
At this point, that neighborhood is really defined as everybody living within 660 feet, I think.
it was 600.
That's the notice area.
Yeah. So, in a small town like this, that might be a pretty big chunk of the population. Depending on what you are.
I had your notice requirements, you know, the stuff you put in red. Why, I don't understand why you would have the Cowlitz County Daikin District, or, you know, we have notice requirements where we post things. Why would you deviate from any of that? Like, I don't understand why you'd even put this in the chamber of commerce.
So you're talking about at the bottom of page 14 and the top
Correct.
of page 15? Because, you know, if it's a private cell company or if it's Verizon, I want them to call the chamber and start talking to the chamber and the port and the Dayton district, because they may not be in tune with the community, and the chamber might know exactly who's going to care about this application. And the sooner they know and the sooner they get the word out, the more people will show up at the neighborhood association. Because if you don't require this and they send it to the 3 people who live within 600 feet of their given site, it's only going to anger more and more people in the community because they live 601 feet away from the site.
Are you going to put it on the website?
So the application would be yes.
But any new site requires SEPA, correct?
Not necessarily. In some cases it does. But to get back to your question, this neighborhood meeting is them meeting with the neighbors before they apply. By the time they apply and I put it on the website, they will miss this opportunity to talk to them face to face at the neighborhood meeting.
Sort of
So,
the same thing as an HOA is.
sorry?
Sort of the same thing as an HOA is.
Well, this doesn't require that organization.
So before they can apply, they have to have a neighborhood meeting.
Yes, some kind of public outreach effort. And we could change this to they have to make a presentation at the chamber, or they have to go to the Moose Lodge and make a presentation. You could literally put that anywhere. We could also eliminate this completely and If it's a new tower, if it requires a public hearing before a hearings examiner, then everybody will find out. The problem, of course, is the city will have taken in the application, the design is done, the analysis is done, and I've already assigned the conditions of approval.
Why don't you have, prior to all that stuff, have them present it to us as a planning commission?
Yeah, that's
I
another
mean,
option.
we're the ones that, people come to this meeting, we can disseminate information. I'm saying add it in, but they need to come to us.
So wait a second, I'm confused. You're saying you'd already have done all this application stuff, but this says 90 days prior to submitting.
Yes, so if we don't require a neighborhood meeting, the only opportunity to have a public hearing is once the application is submitted.
Yeah,
So you could substitute neighborhood association meeting with planning commission meeting, and they can come before you as a work session and give their
Well-
presentation. You give them.
But I like the
I like-
idea that
I like the idea. I
you're
like-
the broader spectrum.
I like the idea of having, at least trying to get the neighbors informed. It may not work, but,
Now, this gets back to the table that we were talking about, and the conditional use permit required for all new towers. Our code has a quirk in that there are conditional use permit decisions that are made by the hearings examiner. There are conditional use permits that are, decisions are made by the planning commission as quasi judicial, and then there are conditional use permits that are made by staff as administrative approvals. My preference would for you to simply say all conditional use permits are approved by planning commission, hearings examiner. I would prefer that those hearings be done before you rather than an administrative conditional use permit that doesn't require a hearing. Especially if we eliminate the neighborhood association and the neighborhood community.
But I don't mind the neighborhood meeting.
I don't think we
because
should
I think it
eliminate it.
holds them accountable. I just think that as part of that, you ask for more. I mean, before they think about doing something, I think they should tell us what they have in mind. June, what do you think about that?
I mean, if it's an allowed use in the industrial zone, and, I'm like, really? I'm like, really? You have to go ask the neighbors' permission to do something that's an outright allowed use? I mean, we don't do that in any other part of our code, do we?
So maybe if we go back to the table on chapter 10, page 10, that chapter that we were looking at, the top two districts are heavy industrial or light industrial. If you were to say heavy industrial beyond 500 feet from a residential dwelling or residential district, it would be a type 2 administrative approval. If it's within 500 feet of a residence, then it becomes a type 3 that requires a hearing or a neighborhood association. So we can put that in here, and then it becomes a qualifying standard as opposed to a procedural permit. Because what it will do is it will encourage new towers to make good decisions to locate as far away from residences as they can.
Well, so does the neighborhood group have any power?
No, but it gives them early notice, and it gives them the opportunity to get organized and come in.
But they don't have any power.
But they can come in and talk to me and communicate, because under the conditional use permit process, ultimately you make the decision, is it consistent with community character and yada, 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 and, if they have a chance to think about it, prepare a defense, or find a different location, they might be able to sway your opinions with the hearings examiner's decision versus they haven't had that time to prepare.
or they could go complain to the city council.
Yeah. And ideally, what's going to happen is the neighbors are going to show up and say, you know what? I want that to look like a,
Cactus.
yeah. Or it's in the church parking lot. I would rather have it look like a steeple or, camouflage it as a flagpole at City Hall. Don't make it look like a fir tree, at the fire station.
And that was only my point in trying to get, so you could has some input. These are big business people. They're not going to, they're going to want to do the least amount they can. So,
And I think, something like a cell tower can end up being controversial enough that you want to head it off.
Yeah, because you can see it from a long ways away, so it's not just the person next door who's going to end up being upset, in the end upset with us about it.
Yeah, in one sense, it makes my job harder because it means more people are going to get upset and come to this. But on the other hand, any decision we make will be more defensible because people have the opportunity to get involved.
Well, I don't understand. I mean, if the majority of the neighborhood says, we've met with these people, we don't want a cell tower here, then are we going to deny them the permit? I mean,
Potentially, you potentially could.
where in the code does it give us the right to deny the permit?
So,
Because the neighborhood association, and there isn't, but, 50%, 51% of the neighbors don't want it.
and that is exactly why the other ordinance that was generated by our
Attorney.
is it doesn't include new towers, because new towers are completely different animals, whereas the attorney's version says we want the stuff that's permitted. Don't even give the illusion that the neighbors can prevent them from replacing panels or updating their electrical boxes or, doing that kind of stuff. This is
Is
a
that
different situation.
is that because Singular Wireless is going to bring lawsuit against City of Woodland and saying you're denying us a federal right to
Yes.
improve our tower?
Yeah, because the federal wireless ordinance or laws actually have what's called the shot clock. And that is, there are situations where a permit is automatically approved that if the staff doesn't process it within a
Yeah.
certain amount of time.
60 days or
Yeah,
something.
it's like you lost your opportunity. It gets approved as proposed, whether it meets the code or not. So all of that is in place because of situations where permitting is
It
involved.
seemed like when I read all the stuff, it seemed like it was so one-sided in favor of the utility, or, big business.
So the approval criteria for a conditional use permit includes that a conditional use permit has to be found, that the proposal will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the public or the property or improvements in the vicinity of the proposed use. The proposed use must meet or exceed performance standards that are required in the district. Proposed development shall be compatible generally with the surrounding land uses in terms of traffic and pedestrian circulation, building and site design. And the proposal shall be in keeping with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and all measures have been taken to minimize the possible adverse impacts which the proposed use may have on the area in which it's located. So the neighbors could come out and argue any one of those 5 points, and you would be able to deny based upon their input. And then it gets into
Maybe.
the question of legal or not. And quite often what happens is the amount of money that the cell tower company would lose in rent versus the amount of money it would take to fight that lawsuit, it's easier for them to just say, yeah, we'll paint it as a pine tree, and if that makes you happy, that's all it is. So that's part of how you get the public involved, so that their argument is prepared when they come see you. That's why that chart on page 10 is so important, because the 1, the 2, and the conditional use permit gives you a lot of latitude to get involved.
I had a question on page 15, number 4. It talks about the first $2,000 in cost for the technical review shall be borne by the applicant. Who pays for it?
Theoretically, that would be the city. And part of that is because if there's an unreasonable amount of reviews that are incurred by the community, re-reviewing and re-reviewing, because I mentioned before that there are very few companies that just do the consulting work of reviewing these plans. There's a couple out of Florida, and I think there's one out of New York. So generally, everybody uses it. And which one you choose to use, you have to go out through RFP public process. One is your primary, and another one is your secondary. And so to prevent us from saying we're going to stop the shot clock because we do this technical review and send it off to Florida and you don't get an answer you like, keep the shot clock turned off, and you go to New York, you don't like their answer, you go back to Florida, and you don't get the answer you like, but you run up a $30,000 consulting bill or a $5,000 consulting bill.
Oh, I bet local people who would like to know the phone number of their property or something, short of saying, $2,000.
Yes, but we don't, and we require reimbursement for the plans reviewer, but we don't send them to 2 or 3 companies to review the same set of plans. This is mostly to prevent abuse of the system and punishing applicants because we don't like their budget.
What's the permit fees?
We don't, I don't know that.
You don't have it on the fee schedule?
I don't know that we currently have a permit fee because our ordinance has raging holes in it. Right now, our entire regulations.
Are you going to
provide-
establish a fee as part of this process?
Renton just did theirs in 2017, and they charged $500 plus reimbursement for consulting fees, which is pretty much what we do for everything. And the $500, $200, $2,000.
And then pay for the hearing.
So we can talk about that later. Right now, it wouldn't be a wireless fee, it would be a conditional use permit fee or a type 1 or a type 2 site. So we're not creating any, I hadn't contemplated creating a specific fee for this. I just assumed we could charge them what we charge everybody else for the same type of permit.
Okay, I want to know there on page 15, number 2, the paragraph that starts with coincidental, and then the next notification in the neighborhood news section. What is that? Here.
Number 3,
Yeah. No, number 2.
Still number 2.
Number 2, the second line, what starts with notification. Notification in the neighborhood news section of the local press.
The Columbian has
What
a
is that?
neighborhood news section, but
publication in the newspaper, which for us is the Reflector.
Yeah.
so you really mean our newspaper of record?
Yeah.
But that's the
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is the applicant, so the applicant may not necessarily realize what the local press represents. So it probably does make sense to the city's paper of record. So that would limit it to requiring them to do it in only the Reflector. But it
Not widely read.
whereas the original language could imply that it has to be the Clark County paper and the Battleground paper and the Long Beach Council paper. With a preference one way or the other.
Say including.
Well, our public
Record.
notices are in the Reflector.
Reflector, yeah.
Yeah, because that's our paper of record.
I mean, either the Columbian or the Daily News, I don't know that either of them is widely read, so.
I'll change that to the city paper of record.
Yeah, I think so.
about posting a sign within the neighborhood, conspicuous location near the edge of the property containing the proposed development. Are you comfortable with that? Single location, multiple locations. About 30 days, 20 days, 15 days prior to the,
What is it for other purposes?
since this is a neighborhood meeting,
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Suppose 30 days.
So up to 120 days prior to application.
Yeah, I'm like, why don't we make it 2 years in advance? I mean, I just think this is onerous. I mean, they don't even have an application in place, so.
Yeah, I think 15 days. Sounds.
Actually, it doesn't matter. People will see it anyway.
As long as that.
I say that people don't necessarily see these things anyway until, after there are facts on the ground and then they start complaining.
I think the Little League sign-up sign goes up about 2 weeks in advance. Little League sign-ups, how about that? They can borrow the banner.
so 14 days prior to the meeting itself.
Sure. It's a day among friends.
So you will make those changes and bring it back, right?
Yep. So what I will do is I will make the changes and then I will talk to Frank about those particular questions. And I will distribute it to the various communication companies and schedule a public hearing on this at our next meeting so that we have a chance to look at it again and take some public testimony and then get to the recommendation for the vote.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with that, or do you want to see it one more time?
No, I'm comfortable.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that. I have another question about not with this this code per se, but just thinking about this topic. I'm wondering about so when you said this was going to be on the schedule, I got curious and I started looking around and I saw some other cities and municipalities had I don't know, I guess leveraged the concession of their utility poles for some public service. So, the one example that stood out to me was saying you can, and it was to a particular provider, said you can locate your facilities on our infrastructure in exchange for providing municipal Wi-Fi. I'm wondering if that's a possibility for us. Could we put out an RFP saying, is anybody even interested in this? I think that having good wireless broadband, particularly in downtown, could be potentially pretty transformative. I think that's. I don't know that it's a slam dunk, but I think it's maybe worth thinking about at least.
So part of what brought this on and why it proceeded so quickly is because the city is having conversations with Verizon about a franchise agreement. And so Public Works Department and the attorney are working with Verizon, and I know that was part of the discussion. Although ultimately what turned out is the driver of that conversation was not for wireless communication services, but they are looking at laying or additional fiber trunk that will be passing through the city. And I'm not sure where it is at this point because they haven't told us, but they're getting their ducks in a row to lay additional fiber through the community.
There's already fiber running along the pipeline.
What's that?
There's fiber optic running along the pipeline.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure exactly what the context of that conversation was, but that is a conversation that may be solved through franchise agreements and not necessarily through the land use code. So I think that we are exploring that option and discussions about potential revenue sources for operating facilities in the city. And so we are.
And I, just like, on that line, I think maybe better than revenue would maybe be amenities that make this a nice place to live.
Yes, some jurisdictions require like a fiber or two be dedicated specifically for city use. That is pretty common.
And there are also much smaller local outfits than Verizon that might be interested in that sort of thing. Anyway, you're right. It's perhaps not code.
Okay, so are we on to staff reports now?
So, I gave you really this, we were debating and should this really be 1A and 1B, because the report that I update and email to you every week or a couple of weeks gives you an idea of how permits are progressing through the process. That's the DRC tracking list. If you have any questions about that, I can address. Actually, in the last week since that was published, we had a bunch of new projects come through the door, so it's daunting because it's getting longer, not shorter. And then the retooling our code update list, there's a couple minor things that I've added to that list, but it's another one of those things that I'm just not going to get to knocking stuff off that until I get my head above water and some of the other stuff we're working on. So no real major changes on those lists. If you have questions.
Would it be possible to just, every 2 weeks, scan the permits, the applications and the permits issued, and just send us a copy of the scan?
So Amanda originally was sending the planning commission and the city council copies of every decision that she issued. If you want me to continue doing that, I'd be more than happy to do that. I put a copy on our front counter, but if you don't come into City Hall, it doesn't help you. So I can send you copies of every decision that I issue. The number of applications that come through our door, quite often I have to send them to Rob on CD or the fire marshal on CD because they're too big to send. But
It just seems like, on the city website, on the notices, I'm always surprised at the lack of public notice information that's on the website. And it seems like, like the stack that's there, like the county just scans it periodically, and so you don't have to stand there and go through the stack of applications.
In addition, I'm behind on redacting the permit copies that are supposed to be posted to the website. I've got a long list of stuff that I need to get caught up on. I'm several months behind on that. But it is on my list of things to do. As soon as I have those permits redacted to the point where they can be published, they will be on the website. They're going to be added to each month. So I'm going to start those. They'll be posted once I'm closed. That's just recording.
Is that an adequate answer, or do you want?
Yeah,
we need to do
I just,
more?
I find it surprising that the website says, you know, you can look at the public notices, but they're not there.
Well, the other thing is not all applications require public notice. So like type ones.
Oh, I know, yeah, I know what you mean. It's just, no, I don't need every decision. It'd just be helpful.
Which is part of the reason why the DRC, why I try and keep that updated and send that out. Because for example, like pre-application conferences, they are on the list, but they never get noted on the website. By the time they get on the website, the meeting will be held and it needs to be taken off already. Whereas the DRC list tells you what they're considering and where they're considering it. So I can add more detail there if that makes it
Doesn't sound like anybody else is interested.
What's that?
Doesn't sound like anybody else is interested.
I kind of like it in the digest form that we're getting.
Yeah,
I
like what we have here. Well, there's a ton of stuff that isn't here, is all I'm saying. You go through the application list at City Hall, there's a ton of stuff that isn't here.
The mayor also pointed out that is having us take a look at our reporting methods, and we're going to be looking at whether or not our permitting system and the system that they use online, whether we should be using that instead of the individual Excel tracking lists. So that list may end up morphing into an electronic report that you can get online and run your own report of everything that's typed.
So are other officials from the city getting more information regarding these issues from the planning commission?
No, like that list goes to yourselves and the city council. The only people that I really send the decisions to are the mayor, Pete, and the department heads, the member of the DRC team that help me do the review. So all the agencies get a copy of the decision and the applicant, and then I haven't been sending you the copies of all the boundary lines adjustment decisions and all that. So I can send them to you if you want me to. And I don't have to send it to the entire planning commission. If you want them, it's public record and public information, just send me an email and I'll add you to my email list.
Is there not some way that we could go to it without
Yeah, you walk in the door on the planning that counter, there's a big stack.
Yes.
No, there isn't.
The list, the computer system that they use for like the agenda items and I forget what, iCompass or something like that, for the like, for the agenda items, it's a different permitting system than the vision permits that you use for community development. And so, the question is being asked, if we're entering the data in vision, and then I'm also keeping up to date in Excel spreadsheet, why am I doing that double accounting? So we're trying to figure out if we can combine it into a single reporting process. But
I
right
was
now,
just thinking, if somebody here wants something, if it's important enough, then we could go to them and see if nobody else can get it.
and when I issue a decision, all decisions do go online, but those are at the end of the process. Notices of application don't go on the website unless they're specifically required.
There's also a monthly report that I put together of all building permits that have been issued. That is also public information. If you want that information, I'm happy to email it to you, as well as the other email it to.
I'd be interested in that, if it's just an email.
Yeah, it's too lengthy, it's got some attachments and stuff, I've got a spreadsheet, and all that, so I can provide you copies of the actual permits, the want to see them.
No,
If
if you
wanted
could
to see
just,
the
if you could just add my name to the.
Anybody else?
I'll email it.
So we have to talk about next month's meeting or whatever,
Yeah.
or not meeting.
Did you say 12 in June?
Did we decide on something?
Yeah, there's a meeting on the 11th and the 25th.
I don't know if we decided.
Well, when we put together all of your unavailable dates that we had at our disposal and blocked out the city council meetings, which were on Mondays, we were left with very few choices. May was pretty much out of the question at that point, unfortunately.
So we're going to have June 11 and 25.
Yeah, that's what's going to be placed.
No meeting in May. Yeah, that works for me. Is there enough time between those meetings to get
Barely,
new stuff
barely.
for us? Okay.
We post.
Good.
I think that actually may be very convenient, because I think what we may do is concentrate on public hearing for wireless communication on the 11th. And then at the end of that, we could potentially close the record and continue it to the 25th to have additional conversation, or that might be one way that.
You're saying that there would be public hearing on the June 11th?
On the wireless facility, so we could get, if we get an attorney or somebody who represents the wireless communication facility, come do a presentation, and walk through the code with you, and we get neighbors and a lot of public testimony. If it runs a couple hours, you may not be able to finish the entire thing on the 11th, in which case you can, continue it to the 25th, and it would be very convenient and very closely back to back.
What days of the week are those?
Mondays.
Both Mondays.
Anything else?
We need to sign, Connie.
Yeah, we got to sign these. I just,
Here, Connie.
Yeah, I've got it.
it's not, I just saw some numbers about sea level rise expected in our immediate vicinity. I'm wondering if that's anything that's coming up in our
Some
planning.
numbers on what, sorry?
Projected sea level rise in, basically here, in the Columbia River estuary. Particularly talking, we're talking about some of those roads we're in, on the map we're in floodplain, we're talking about development in floodplain. It seems pertinent.
Would you like me to ask the Dayton District to come on one of those two agendas and tell you about anything the county is working on?
Yeah, if they've got something, if they're working on it. How about that? Somewhere between 30 centimeters and 2 meters in the next 50 years. That's not negligible.
So you have that, we're working on the wireless facilities and this retooling, you've got this other worksheet in here, and then you've got tiny homes under the residential code. But I thought one of our priorities was the multifamily code.
There's, I just threw the tiny homes in there because it was kind of a little more than just what you would think of as the residential. So residential densities and that will be part of the conversation, and part of that will be the analysis that occurs with the urban growth area and the available land supply and the potential applications coming in the door. Because I think that this is going to be part of the conversation when he was talking about, 500 to 1,000 homes in the next 20 years. Our current code has a standard for 60-40 single-family, multifamily. And the question is our code prepared to address that? Because if AHO is planning on building all single-family residential, how is that going to affect our comprehensive plan? So,
What does that have to do with the?
Yeah, what does that have to do with high-density residential?
I mean, that was our chief priority, this is what we started out with, and this is where we're burning daylight on this year. We're already in communities, we want to get high, we want to get high. Tiny homes are not on my radar right now. They can come on a later day and we can work on our.
well, high-density residential, tiny homes could be considered high-density residential. While we're having a conversation, the diversity of housing stock, that's part of the high-density residential conversation. Because
Okay,
we
so
put a
then when
tiny
does
home
that
on
mean
the
we're
side of the
starting?
lot.
So when's it going on the agenda?
I hadn't thought about that, so it might be the item you wanted on the June 25th agenda, start having that conversation.
On high density residential. I mean,
That one, it's going to require a lot of work, and we can start the conversation on the 25th, but I can guarantee you, it's not a one hearing conversation.
Workshop.
Multiple hearing conversation.
that's my conversation.
Yeah, and it's going to be relevant to this conversation about comprehensive plan update. So we're going to have to get these into the code.
Well, comprehensive plan, you're talking about changing the urban growth boundary. Correct?
Yes, yeah.
So once we change the boundary, our code needs to be revised before we adopt a change in the urban growth boundary per se. Does.
Possibly.
I mean,
Yes.
if we change the urban growth boundary and there's an annexation, whatever our code is, that's what it is.
Possibly. So that, they're not mutually exclusive because we have existing zoning in place.
Yes.
And your conclusion could be that our existing zoning is adequate and you're going to need 100 new acres or 1,000 new acres in the urban growth boundary. On the other hand, if you were to adjust the zoning first, it might determine that you need 50 acres versus 2,000 acres. So I'm very well aware of that, and their timeline is driving a lot of work for them. Yeah, so I recognize that, and
Their time.
the applicants who want to amend the comprehensive plan. So that's why we're having this conversation about transportation, and the zoning is going to be part of that, and housing stock, and job production. And that's all going to have to be analyzed for the comprehensive plan update.
And yet, the Planning Commission, as Tella said, I think a lot of us are really sensitive to including park, recreation, and alternative transportation and trails within the comprehensive plan. So I think there would be a big conversation about annexing a bunch of acreage without those things in place.
Yeah, I know, and I understand I know exactly how big of an issue this is, because now we've gone from a discussion about transportation to the utilities that go in the roads and in the right of way. We're talking residential and land use. We're now talking about housing chapter, and we're talking about the Parks and Rec chapter. we're talking the entire comprehensive
Mhm.
plan needs to be updated in the next 2 months. By myself with no consulting work, for part of that conversation, yeah,
Well, all the land they're talking about is a perfect bike, hike, trail location.
Well, we don't, I mean, the comprehensive plan update, it's gonna take, what did you say, 2 months? I mean, but we need to deal with a lot of issues before we get to the comprehensive plan, because they all deal with the comprehensive plan. If we want to get the codes of these things updated, so that when the comprehensive plan, that stuff is in place, so we have more control over what comes into the cities and the building standards and the architectural.
yes. I agree with you partly because part of what we can do is we can talk about expansion of the urban growth boundary, but until they actually annex or submit development applications, you don't necessarily have to trigger some of those other conversations. So for example, they can be included in the urban growth area, but if they apply for annexation and the city council says no, because we haven't updated our high-density zoning code, the answer is no. Or you're proposing all low-density residential, and our comprehensive plan requires 60/40, and if your project isn't right for annexation and service, the city council can do that. And if you have stuff on your plate to do in October, November, December, they can always say, we're not going to annex you until that work is done. So that's a policy decision that doesn't all have to be decided before you decide what the urban growth area is. You can expand the urban growth area to an additional 500 acres and not annex any of it because it takes you 2 years to update your code until you're comfortable that the code is prepared for that next 100 acres to be annexed. So just because you're updating the comprehensive plan for the next 20 years, they're not necessarily have to be done at the same time. It's good planning, but
Do you have any requests from Clark County for annexation or inclusion in the UGB?
so all of Clark County is Horseshoe Lake, inside of Horseshoe Lake, and it is already in our existing urban growth boundary.
I'm talking on the other side of the Lewis River,
On the other side.
in Clark County.
Nobody has approached me about it.
Nobody's asked.
I know that the mayor has asked me to start thinking about what that would
Mhm.
take. And Clark County recently had a joint planning commission city council meeting
Mhm.
because they have two planning documents. They have a 50-year vision document, the countywide planning policy document, and they have a 20-year comprehensive plan that's growth management compliant. And their 50-year countywide planning policies, its population projection, they achieved it, they'll achieve it next year. Their 50-year growth horizon, they will have achieved in 26 years, I think it was,
Just close
25
the door.
years. And so
Put the gates down.
they're currently having the conversation about whether or not they realistically need to revise spend $2 million to revise their 50-year vision, or whether they need to spend that $2 million on updating their 20-year comprehensive plan. So they were having that conversation, and it looks like they're going to continue the policies and look at their comprehensive plan and their shoreline program, I think, next. So they're having that conversation. And when I was at that meeting, I was asked to step up and say something for the city, and I specifically raised the question of North County growth and the trips that it causes on the CC Bridge coming through exit 21 and 503 traffic from Clark County growth, and the city's desire to potentially expand our urban growth boundary into Clark County. And the answer at that point was, we appreciate that input, but we're not talking about individual
properties or communities who are trying to decide what's our next big comp plan for the county-wide planning
But it's my understanding that they've been approached, they're not too distant past, and they just didn't know.
which is kind of what they told me, and that is, they're not prepared. There's a quirk in the Clark County Comprehensive Plan, and that is, they've allotted zero growth to woodland in the 20-year plan. So if that property were to annex into the city of Woodland, and we were to approve or get an application for an additional residence, the question is, could I approve that residence because it is not compliant with the Clark County Comprehensive Plan?
You're talking about even inside the island?
Portion of it. Yeah, so I don't know, I don't truly know the answer to that because according to the comprehensive plan, there is no growth envisioned in the next 20 years
But it's
inside of
under
Woodland.
urban holding, which means that, I mean, I'm not taking away anything, but it's under urban holding, and it says, you know, we can't annex certain things until we can provide services or.
Yes, and it's an interesting question because theoretically, if we annex them, they would have urban services available to them, which means technically Clark County needs to update their comprehensive plan because their comprehensive plan would be inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan.
Geez, I think you have to shut down the city shop.
Well, the city
Shop
shop
is-
currently in the city.
No, I think the city shop is in the county. I think the city limit sign is right in front of the driveway.
And it
Yeah.
goes right down.
So you guys have an illegal use over there. You know, you better shut that down.
So I've had that conversation.
That was
with
it was
their
the
planning
state shop, and the state released it to the city, and the city turned it into a maintenance facility for the city public works department, so,
Yeah,
yeah, sorry about that.
yeah. I'm already wrestling that, which is why you can see when it comes to the long-range planning stuff, these are long conversations, and
Yeah.
I've already tried having that conversation. So the idea of, trying to rush the high-density residential with the TIP program, and the long-range stuff takes a long time. I can sit down and bang out a report for a boundary line adjustment in a day or two, and that stuff is.
Let's not make that, I mean, if we just tackle the high density residential,
Yeah.
let's not make it more difficult.
No, I just think if we're going to increase the urban growth boundaries, that we should go into Clark County over by Cardi Hill and where those mobile home parks are. It just seems like a logical place to grow instead of always into Cowlitz County.
Yes, and this conversation was right because they were talking about expanding the water system from Misty Lane underneath the river to
The other side.
to the North County. There's a small water system
Mhm.
that has high arsenic water. So our public utilities is working with us, and it's because it's an emergency, it's a health issue.
So Misty Lane well, is that what you're?
The water, the city water lines
The city water
that
line
serve Misty.
has higher?
No. In Clark County, there's a small water system that's off a well, and they have high arsenic. And so they're trying to find a solution for healthy water. The only option at this point is to bore underneath the river and connect to our system. It's the only viable way.
And here's our horse trading mechanism. We'll do that and we'll annex.
Yes, and the
this
mayor's.
huge chunk of Clark County.
Yes, and the mayor was asking these questions because, why do a 2-inch line when we can do an 8-inch line? And the question is, do we have the money to do an 8-inch line? We even asked the question of, can we take the water across the bridge and along Hayes Road, and all of a sudden, we have a ton of people that we can serve, and it justifies expanding our urban growth boundary, but it's money we don't have to spend on a water line, and yeah, so it's just, a situation where great opportunity, but we need no money, we haven't saved for a rainy day, we missed it. Yeah.
Maybe Tracy can sell smelt from the new park. That looks really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
If they'd let us do it. They haven't let us do it in the rules for years.
Leave it for the seal. Leave it for the seals. Yeah, let's see.
Oh,
Are we done?
are we done?
I move we're done.
All in favor of being done? Aye.
You know, we have this huge it's just
They're selling, these up on the dock. Yeah, so they're talking about.
Liz Segal is living in check. So if you don't want it, you can throw it back. And I'm totally confused. I'm like, she's comp plan industrial.
In the county.
And I'm like, and she's adjacent to the city limits and has city services. So I'm like, she's far from the same
Yeah.
situation as down the road.
So part of her application, part of this process for her